What's up, everybody? This is gonna be a little more janky than normal, but I was having mad technical difficulties, and I couldn't get my mic set up. So we'll be using the cell phone mic. A little janky, but we'll make it work because you know what it is. It's Overthrow Media, so we do not have a budget except what y'all put on Patreon. You know what I mean? But hey, I saw 7 of you all waiting. I see you. Wait for my co-host to hop on, and then we'll be getting started. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Sorry, computer's on this side. So you see me look away. I'm actually looking at y'all's comments or anything else that happens. So that's kind of how it's going to be going, just because of the setup. I've been couch. Ooh, mute that. Woo! Okay, mute yourself, or mute me. Yeah. Oh, I get it. You might have to do self headphones in if that's the case. Can you mute me?
I muted my mic.
Oh, don't mute your mic. Maybe you just
Settings, audio.
Woo, technical difficulties, y'all. I'm sorry. Yeah, I might have to. One of us might have to wear headphones, and I think about it.
I can go headphones. They have a little mic on them too.
Oh, that worked. Yeah. Wait. I'm all up in y'all's face. Sorry. All right. Like I said, technical difficulties, y'all. Technical difficulties. All right. You might want to switch on the side.
Oh. I've got it rotating.
Remove you for a second. Let's see. Wait till your headphones are in. Yeah, you know that's how it goes on Overthrow Me. Sometimes be a little janky out here. Sometimes we just throwing it together, making it happen because we got no budget. How's everybody doing? Let's sound off in the comments. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm muted, I think.
You can't hear me?
No.
Why? Cam can hear me. All right, let's. Hey, everybody in the comments, can y'all hear me? Is the echo bad?
No, I just can't. It isn't linking with this.
Yo, can y'all hear me? Sound off in the comment section. Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right, if you turn that one down, then it should be fine. Just turn the sound all the way off on that one.
I can't. It's not even letting me do that.
No, just like turn your volume down.
I'm trying. It's like not letting me go past a certain point.
She is neat. Oh, you left.
Didn't mean to.
All right. Well, I'm gonna keep y'all entertained real quick while we wait on to get this set up. This is not their fault. This is mine. I had a whole plan, but then it went south when my mic wasn't set up in the right way and wouldn't like start. So, yeah. We'll think this is the warm up. We're warming up real quick to get it popping. You know what I mean? And Yeah. Shoo.
Hello, check.
You're not even in the thing right now. Oh, yeah. You got them working? Okay.
I think so.
All right, bet. You're back. So.
Yeah, I know it says backstage.
All right.
Okay. Good. What's up, dude?
So I got to turn my thing down to what as well. So I'll do that right now.
Hmm?
Boom. All right, cool. We should. Let me know that there's no echo, everybody. It should be no echo now. After we both turn our sound down and shit. So we're gonna have this conversation style. This is jelly. Okay, what jelly? I bet jelly bean. Let's go.
Yeah, jelly squat. Let's go.
All right. So basically today we're gonna touch on a few things. Part of it is gonna be roasting. Okay, this is the order it's gonna happen. First, I'll break down. We'll talk about 2010 to 2020, the anarchist radical influence and abolitionist influence on today's movement, specifically around anti-police. The second thing we're going to talk about will be the invisible black lives, like corn gangs, for example. And then we'll get with the young Turks versus voosh. That's some fun little conversation we're going to jump into. And then Palestine versus Israel and like what's going on with it. So we're going to do this as short that we normally do it. Moving forward, it'll be like 2 hours a person. 2 hours per stream. A person, I don't know why I said that. But 2 hours a stream. But for this one, I got to be out at 5:30, so we're going to cut it probably 5:25. But we're going to get into it. We just jump into it because we're short on time.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about this history. And if y'all realize this is a comrade that I organized industries we met during John T. Williams, which I'm sure a lot of y'all haven't heard of, which was a native carver who was killed by the police.
By fucking bastard Ian Burke. That was the shithead's name. Gave him 4 seconds, not even, before he fucking shot him a bunch of times. Like
shot him in the back because he couldn't hear him because he's partially deaf while he had headphones in while he was carving. You know what I mean?
He was a local wood carver in Seattle, and fuck.
Rest in peace, John T. and like fucking Burke, like to be 100%. So I think that's how we met specifically, but like for me, the originators in the police abolition movement came from being the co-founder of Seattle Cop Watch, or the founder, whatever you want to look at it. We're both founded at the same time. It was like someone came first, but and then during the John T. Williams stuff, I think I was leading. I think the people at the time. I think it was like I was the leader of it, but I was like a mentor, so I was like helping chaperone, I guess is a better word than leading. A lot of the youth coming out to protest for John T. And I think that's what you meant because you mentioned how I was like all in red.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But I knew you were going to be one of the anti-state communists who weren't just trying to give me a fucking pamphlet. You were actually like there to fucking do something. And I was like, oh shit, yep, let's go. I got into that just because got radicalized in late '99 right before my 13th birthday because of the WTO, and I started doing shit. And the anarchist movement, mostly was being subsumed in the anti-war stuff, early mid-2000s. It started transitioning, especially in the Northwest, to port militarization resistance and resisting the war shipments through the different ports, Olympia and Tacoma, and what were the other? I'm not sure. There was some other actions. But the anarchist movement was taking a really bad beating. And we kind of were jumping all over the place wherever things were, but there wasn't a specific trajectory that we were really pushing hard on until John T. was murdered. And that pushed all of us who were already thinking about how to push an anti-police trajectory further, once we saw the groundswell, and it's not like it was the only uprising in the mid 2000s, like in Cincinnati, Ohio in 2005. I can't remember the person's name, but there was massive riots there. But it wasn't connected. And in 2010, there was a concerted effort from kind of insurrectionary anarchists and anti-state communists to like focus on how this system affects all of us, because it does. If it affects all of us, some more than others, obviously, but any of us can wind up in its fucking net, and that's like a common thing that can unite a lot of people. And yeah, that it was a trajectory that every uprising after that point, because they all had clearly defined anti-police praxis as one of their main things. Like in Occupy, it was always, we were constantly telling the liberals, the cops are not your friends, the cops are not your friends. And then they'd get beat up and pepper sprayed, and they'd be like, why? What? Like, we told you so. But by like 2016, 2018, a lot of those liberals stayed a little bit more quiet. They're on their megaphones, they try and lead their little march, but ultimately there was like a lot more pushback, and they knew kind of that they had to at least push some kind of an abolitionist, at least in rhetoric, line. And because
I remember back in the day, it was like 99%. I mean, can you turn that?
Yeah.
I don't know why it's still so loud. Oh shit, there he goes back again. But 99% or what was it? Police are probably 99% was like the narrative we were fighting against during Occupy. They wanted to communicate specifically and give routes, for example, like not just like the Democratic Party types, but also like some of the like bigger socialist groups like ISOs that wanted to do like routes to like the police to how we're about to do a march or something. And we're like, yeah, not happening. Like we were like, there's all this conflict behind. Can we or can we not talk to police? And it's like, no, you can't talk to police. It's not at least not in a respectful way, not in a communicative way, not giving us information. And then one of the things people would think people do certain things, like we had this saying, I think we talked about one before about baptization by mace, because people would not believe us about how problematic the police are, how violent they are, until they were being attacked. You know what I mean?
Baptism through fire. Yeah, I've seen many a liberal turn into radicals the moment they get their head cracked or some mace in the face or some. I don't mean to laugh, but it's gallows humor. I've had enough of that shit on me, so I can laugh at it. It's called trauma. Like, that's how we fucking survive. We make jokes and we connect. But yeah.
Yeah, and bet on like that started changing. I remember the radical, the anarchist, and anarcho-communist scene grew a lot from Occupy because we were able to adequately predict what the police were about to do. Nobody wanted to listen to it at first until everything we said would happen started happening. And like, oh, you were right. Like, yeah, it wasn't even that hard to predict because we've already been doing that to the police a bunch of times. We already know what it is. Which is like one of the first times I had that moment where I was like, I was kind of like older in the movement. I wasn't older, but like I was like someone had more experience in the movement. Mm-hmm. That was like the first time it happened, but not the last time. And I feel like a lot of the trends that happened with us being super anti-police and super stand down about, like there's a point where we were folks that pushed the police out of the encampment, because after we had moved the encampment from Westlake to Seattle Central, they were trying to harass us then, and we had pushed them out and they never came back. At least not until everybody started leaving.
Yeah, and they it was like when like Obama put out the national orders to like crush it nationally, not just like kind of locality versus locality, because some of the more some places around the country with Occupy, it was you had this like the cops came down pretty heavy. Some tried to be a little bit more hands off because of like the more liberal elements guiding it. They had more they had more strings in that crowd. But the more combative occupiers or occupations or whatever, decolonizes, occupy, all that stuff, whatever it is, the commune we were building, it was eventually crushed when finally when Obama put out just like national, like, no, we got to crush this shit from the federal level, and yeah.
So my question: anybody got advice for getting involved in anarchist movements when one is isolated and in a rural area?
So to be honest, I actually live kind of like right at the edge of like small town into like country and shit, and I'm lucky. I live in a little college town, so like there's a lot more punks per capita. We're holding it down a lot more, but there's still a lot of challenges. But if you there was a thing that there was this old punk dude at Occupy that was telling some of my young friends, and so we were all talking, and he was like, yeah, if you wear all that shit, just know, like, if you're going to be doing the gamer revolution, you got to dress the part, which means don't be fucking showing off. Don't be like, oh, look at me, I'm like, I got all these things on me. That you don't have to be like everything's a circle A or everything's a this or that. Like, you don't have to for every situation. If you want to throw that up around town or whatever, just to leave your mark, great, go for it. But things like Food Not Bombs, or even just no name, like mutual aid efforts, put up some flyers around your town. If hunger is actually an issue, maybe there's some older folks, there are mutual aid efforts that can start going. And yeah, you might be helping out some elder or something that can't get out of their house, and that is close to that kind of charity side. But their family members might learn about your organization and go, shit, like, I'm going to help with that because there are times where I might need that service, mutual aid, things like that. Postering around, seriously, every, for May Day and shit, all the different big events in Seattle, we would try and poster the entire metropolitan area, like all the way out to the east side, up north to like Everett, down south to Tacoma, with posters at middle schools, high schools, skate parks, libraries, places where people hang out. You can just leave a little poster like, hey, like, is anybody having these same kind of problems? Email this group email. You can start small. But tackle those rural challenges that fucking the libs in the cities don't give a shit about. They're just gonna be like, oh, those guys are yokels, And it's like, yeah, well, some of these yokels you're fucking talking about are the most working class people I know, and they're fucking solid. And we got challenged, people got challenges in those areas. And the more we can like find ways to link those projects between the cities and the rural areas, between mutual aid, between like networks of like friendship or organizational, like, acquaintances, the better everybody is. Because you get the barbarian hordes coming from the rural areas to come raid the cities every once in a while. And when natural disasters, the things that are going to be happening more and more in the coming years and decades, there are people in the cities who know folks in those rural areas to network with, to get supplies, to tell people, hey, this is where you can come out of this rural area that maybe has a wildfire or massive flooding. These are the points where we're distributing goods,
I mean, I think a lot to reaching out to is just reaching out to your friends. I remember when I started, it was first like literally me and one other person or two other people actually, and that was it. There wasn't nobody else, and then also knowing what needs are. So ask yourself what you need. Ask yourself what the people around you need, and you start building from there. Yep. I don't think I was like really trying to become an anarchist. Like I think, like for me as an anarcho-communist, right? I didn't start even identifying as an anarchist till like later. Right, because at first I was just the communist. I mean, that's just what it was, and because it was about the needs and what the struggles we are facing. But let's wind it back into like what we're talking about. For everybody who jumped in, like I said, right now we're on the topic of 2010s to 2020 and how the police abolitionist movement affect the present culture and the political scene. Yes, we will get to the Young Turks and voosh, but that'll be 2 segments down. So just bear with us for now. All right, but I think one of the things is when we see it, we saw like Occupy happen, right? But then from there, afterwards, there was things like the outside agitators, BLM. There's the first and the second wave of BLM. It was very different. There was a Mike Brown wave of BLM before BLM, the hashtag became BLM.org, before the people who made the hashtag claimed it as theirs and stuff. And I think one of the things that was really emphasis in those situations was a lot of the movement was coming from the people. But then, of course, that was amplifying a lot of the police abolition movement. All of us, or most of us who were there during Occupy, of course, were there when BLM popped up. Especially my ass, I'm a nigga. What you mean? Like, I'm going to be there. That's without a question. But, yeah, and I think I also remember, like, it was still a reluctance to be as combative to the police.
Oh yeah,
at that point,
there was so much liberal reluctance to even acknowledge the situation for what it is. You know, these are the front line of the occupying colonial forces. Like they exist to protect property rights, and property is the system by which social divisions are created and reinforced, and most crime, if you will, comes from those inequalities of property. But that liberal push was like less and less each time, each wave. And by outside agitators, it was more direct.
But like the first wave, there were certain people like me and other people that were more like lumpen proletariat backgrounds or proletariat backgrounds that were after police, overwhelming a lot. Like the church people were still coming, a lot of people who were really apologetic and just like when we see accountability. I was like, bro, they killed this kid, left him in the fucking streets for like
4 hours.
Like a day, man. That's wild, man. That is wild. And but at first they weren't really like vibing with this. At first there was like only like the working class people, and then there was everybody else. The academics definitely weren't vibing with us. The academic activists tended to not vibe with militant stuff. They can,
Well, it's bad for the career. It's bad for their career. They gotta play ball until they can get that mythic pie in the sky of tenure to protect themselves, and still by that time they're entirely propagandized.
Yeah, fully stimulated. I know we'll talk about different videos, but I know you mentioned like what's his name, Chomsky, talking about how the more you are in that hierarchy, the more indoctrinated you are, which is something that I've seen definitely in the streets when it comes to activism.
Yeah, he's a dork, but the quote comes to my head like all the time. Like, definitely got critiques of Chomsky.
Though I will say there was a little bit more militancy from the academics by the time we got to outside agitators.
Oh yeah.
Now there was still this jump, right? Because there was like performative militants by academics, and the people more working class were more like no militants, right? And so there was a divide, but it wasn't as big as it had been before. So it was way more like tenable. If that makes sense. I don't know what your perspective. I'm speaking from a black perspective. I'll let you speak from another perspective outside that experience. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, like as an anarchist, my goal, is liberation, is to destroy, ultimately to erase from history, at least not in a way that we can't learn from, but erase the memory of all of these empires and all these forms of domination and control. And so that project, to be there where we can put pressure, we can apply pressure on certain vulnerabilities, effectively, these contradictions in this society. We were involved in other stuff too, but these police murders keep coming back, and it's more likely than not when you see the face, even though statistically, the raw numbers, there are more white people slightly usually that are killed, but per capita, the numbers are off the chart for Black and Indigenous people being murdered by the police. And so these points of attack, we kept pushing through the Mike Brown stuff, things like.
I also want to jump in there too. I also want to say not only does that the raw numbers be misleading, but one thing people always ignore is how many times is it Dylan Roof, right? Buying burgers and taking them to jail after Mexico, a bunch of people, right? Yes. And so it's we see how the police are rendered to use and empower white supremacy. White supremacy, the White Supremacist Act, he gets burgers before jail. Yeah, he's still in jail because they to uphold the system, they still had to take him to jail. But if it was up to them, they probably wouldn't have. Obviously. Why would you feed to do like that?
Because if you look at the numbers of white people, for example, murdered by police, for the most part, it's vastly outnumbering. Poor folks are vastly outnumbered in that than maybe a couple of rich people occasionally. But that shit isn't happening. And also mental health.
Here's the thing is, if they're rich, what race are they really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. let's look at the numbers. We're like, it's a safe bet. But like getting back to the outside agitators, that transition from Mike Brown to outside agitators, like there were a lot of us pushing for more like active, like let's find these pressure points in society and apply pressure, like not just to hawk a pamphlet or throw a thing or ooh, we're doing outreach, but to actually have a noticeable impact on the police's ability logistically to control the territory and hurt people ultimately, hurt and oppress and murder, which they do every day, even when it's not murder. They're just fucking beating the shit out of you or fucking throwing you in the back in a fucking car or whatever. But from the Mike Brown to that when we talk about outside agitators, that was there's too many fucking names, man. Jesus Christ. Outside agitators was 2014 or 2015.
I mean, I don't even try to remember dates at this point. I've been doing this way too long.
Yeah.
I just like it feels like it's 2015, 2016 time.
Okay.
I mean, and some explanation, and we're not like start speeding up this just to get to the next segments, but like some explanation, outside agitators is literally a multiracial organization led by Black folks that was made because we were more militant at that point, and like especially the early BLM to then, and it was kind of like a transition period between that and like the second wave of BLM, and it was to be like, oh yeah, we are always labeled outside agitators, right? In our own communities, we're fighting for our own rights. So let's just claim that, all right? Just like MLK was called outside agitator, fine. We're outside agitators. Let it be what it is. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah! I'm outside from everywhere. We all are.
So that
we don't exist anywhere.
So it's like black, red, multiracial organizers. Black, red, multiracial organizers. So black folks were the ones leading all the actions, myself included. But there was a multiracial organizing group. You know what I mean? So that makes some type of sense to y'all. So that happened. That popped off. And then the later BLM was coming kind of directly out of that for a while, like, you know what I mean? And then we kind of like died off, and we really didn't see it veer up till 2020. Now, meanwhile, at the same time, we're having a lot of anti-police actions the whole time. Our May days were anti-police set it off times. Always. It was like a holiday to people like set it off, you know what I mean? For like multi years in a row. But then we get to 2020 and we see kind of the culmination of that culture that we had built of police abolition, because police abolition was like a ludicrous thing back when we first started organizing.
Yeah, even 10 years ago, dude. Even 10 years ago, outside of like anarchist and certain like communist organizing, not even like any socialists or the libs, and none of them were talking about it. None of them cared. So it's like, it's a very much more recent push. And I think it's not just us in our regional location. It was like a concerted effort across the board in a lot of places to push, that more, at least that level of rhetoric to encourage like people to kind of start questioning certain foundational things about the police, like, oh, they've always been here. No, the first police force in the United States was 1824. Like that was one of the first, or no, I think, it's like 1824. I think is like it was either Boston or Philly was the first, and it was right after the 18 teens was when the city of London created like the first police force. That shit's new.
I mean, that's the first non-slave patrol police force.
Yes. But they function differently, like in the way that they operate.
Like the police we know now are merging both of those things. I think honestly more rooted in the slave patrol thing, because more of their actions are about slave patrols, right? Yep. What they do, they arrest people and they extort people. That's what they do now. If we break the police down accurately, that's what they do.
They hunt in packs. They don't. They always take advantage of numbers. They effectively act like a hyena band. That's how they interact. And so, it's the slave patrol. That's exactly how those motherfuckers acted too. Yeah,
man. And the thing is this a bit better from what is, because we talk about hyena impact and we start to make correlations with the what's it called, the Montgomery Brawl. You know what I mean? Like how they move, even though they weren't police. You can see how them folks move. They come from literally that history, right? That history of slave patrols, and that's what gives people empowered because he is still upholding that same thing. And that's the same thing that police move on, is that same entitlement, except they're given a badge that was validated by the state even more so than it is by average white folks. But 2020, we saw a change where everybody was like, yeah, police are bad. We saw people turn police abolition to defund. And I will say defund and police abolition are not the same thing. Defund is like a reform version of that. You know, where abolition means like, no, we just don't, no police. Like, no police. At least it's not saying no security or whatever, or no community militias or things like
self-defense.
that. Self-defense groups. But we're not doing the police kidnapping people and enslaving people for profit shit. That's just not what we're chasing towards. And we saw that like become widely accepted in 2020, at least to some degree. You know what I mean? Even though defund isn't like fully abolition.
Yeah, like larger numbers than I've ever seen in my entire life. Like it's fucking wild. It was like, you know, I knew that there was going to be another lull. Like it was going to be subsumed by, you know, the empire. But people learned from it. You learn from your experiences. And I know I saw so many young people out in the streets during the couple of months that it just, you know, I know that at least some of them are going to maybe be with other friends, not the same people, but the next uprising, I'm going to see them there and they're going to be doing the same things, talking to the young people, being like, hey, keep yourself safe. Check it out. Like, cover up your face or whatever. Don't let the security state get you. Because that's what I kind of helped them with. And they were like, oh shit. And some of them were like, oh, I told you guys so. Like, we need to, you know, and
that brings us another point too, as older folks that have been doing it for a long time. It's kind of our responsibility, if you know what we're doing, to make sure that they don't catch charges. You know what I mean? Like, not to dictate them, not to tell them how they should move, but like, no, you got to think about like you're masking up all these different things so you don't go to jail because these people are watching. How
to stay free while you're doing this shit.
And one thing I think we should talk about in the future, not this stream, but like the waves. So I don't know if everybody knows that how like this works, but there's like waves of resistance where there's like these peaks and these slows down and it goes up and down like that. It's not like a straight trajectory. It's a straight trajectory, but it's like this. You know what I mean?
And like, at the top of that wave, you feel like the world's changing. It's a different world. You're in a completely other world. And at the bottom of that peak or at the bottom of that valley, you feel like there's no point. You're like, what the fuck? Like everything we've lost, you know? And it's hard, but always remember that we're already living in the era of the counter-revolution. There were revolutionary struggles through the late 19th and early 20th century, and they were crushed by the empires. And we're living in the aftermath of multiple world wars that crushed them. And, you know, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from these ebbs and flows of resistance. We can learn and we can share each other's knowledge, you know? And in that way, I keep every single other person alive that I ever met through this process of the last over 20 years. Jesus Christ. Too fucking long. But
yeah, we the same age, but you started a little bit earlier than me. I started after I got a joint. You started like when you were like in high school.
No, the first thing I ever went to was the WTO, and I was 12. I was like 2 months before my 13th birthday. And the first day I went was like late on Wednesday, and I was able to get back home. The reason my mom found out, she was cool because my mom's like social democrat type, you know, I got stuck in Seattle because all the buses were shut down and shit. And I was like, I had to call my uncle, and they were all working together. They're like, oh, you're stuck in Seattle, huh? And I was like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my first. And then I never stopped. There was the anti-war stuff. There was, you know, and then just all different types of like, you know, there's different environmental actions, but none of them really started hitting until anarchists really started taking, and anti-state communists really started taking the fore with like direct anti-police praxis in all movements. And then what a shocker, all those movements started being a bit more successful. Yeah, we're still going to lose many fights. When you're fighting up against a giant, you will, but we started winning some too. Like the fact that folks in Seattle literally stopped Shell from putting a fucking oil rig in the Arctic. We fucking stopped that, you know? and they fought hard against it. But but that was also informed by the same anti-police praxis that we were pushing other places.
Yeah. Like I mean, they're definitely anti-police. At least for was squatting us the whole time. And at first, we were the annoying motherfuckers because people didn't like our anti-police energy. But by 2020, motherfuckers is ever common.
Way more on board.
One thing I want to move to the second segment. And we'll transition. I will say, to my segments, now we're talking about Black lives, or like the invisibilized Black lives specifically, because not all Black lives are invisibilized. Specific ones are. And some of the ways that like the movement has failed specific people, specific groups of people, specifically working class, proletariat. That's our next segment, and especially ties in a lot with the police brutality. Then after that, we're going to get to the Young Turks versus voosh, and then we're going to end with the Palestine-Israel conflicts. So now let's jump into the part about talking about how a lot of these police movements, and talk about how a lot of these abolition movements have failed on a lot of people. One of the things I remember going back in the day when we were doing a lot of police movements, I was organizing at that point is this group called Seattle Black Book Club. It wasn't a book club. That's not what it was. It was just supposed to be like a code name, but we got repetition anyway pretty fast because we were disruptive. Because a lot of us came directly out of outside agitators. You know what I mean? So I remember one point where Corin Gaines, and I'm sure a lot of people know what Corin Gaines is. But Corin Gaines was a woman who was murdered by the police. Her child, her like 5 or 6 year old child, was shot by the police. He survived. She died. And people just didn't really have a lot of care about it. I remember we skipped the protests and like only about like 50, 60 people showed up. At that point in time, it might seem like a lot, but at that point in time, average anti-police group protest or Say Her Name protest, Black Lives Matter protest would bring in 200-300 people. But because she was one of the, what's it called, when they think they're not a citizen, you remember that name? The Paul thing, I think that
sovereign citizen.
Yeah, she was a sovereign citizen, so people didn't care, right? She was also kind of hood, so people didn't care. And it seems to be a pattern that we see a lot of times with in the movement is specific people are not valued, right? And I see that a lot with non-military. And I know specifically they'll be like, well, what about Mike Brown? What about George Floyd? Those tend to be the exceptions. But the people who are most likely to be elevated are going to be Sandra Bland's, or going to be let me think of like some booty dudes that were murdered, like, or brutalized. There are a few of them I just can't remember the name right now. Or it's going to be even people who don't get brutalized, like there's one teacher out here who got maced, and we both got maced at the same time. 500 like K for that dude, and everybody else just because he had status. And I think one of the things that we see a lot of when we talk about remembering Black lives that have been lost to the system and the state, they pick people that tend to have more status or are more respectable, while people who live in it daily are usually put to the side as like not being valuable. We saw that with Sean Firth, for example, out here. You know what I mean? When he was killed with his baby in his hands, and people didn't really care until people were setting off with the uprising, and people were like, "Yeah, remember Sean Firth." You know what I mean? And so when we start thinking about like how these things play out, yeah, there are people who are like the young brother before Mike Brown. BLM really started from it.
Tamir Rice. There was Tamir Rice. There was
fucking Florida. Zimmerman killed him.
Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin, thank you, man. That's sorry. No disrespect. There's so many names that like, especially when you organize a lot, like you go and you're trying to remember like which person, it was Eric Garner, but like Trayvon Martin, who was in a more like affluent community, right? So it was like those are the reactions that we see a lot of energy into, versus a lot of people who are working class, who are proletariat, who are poor. Most of us, it's not even a drop in the bucket. You know what I mean? Lost you.
Yeah, I know. I'm having problems with the mic. It's not picking it up. just realized.
I mean, just use the thing because it's not really. You're
Okay.
still coming. The sound's still coming out
Okay.
the phone.
Okay.
Shoot. Yes, we're actually in the same room. That's why I had to echo.
Check.
Oh, you got to get back in. You left.
I know.
some-
I was just checking my mic.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Okay. Cool.
All right. And so I think when we look at these things, we gotta look at exactly who is the most affected and then start prioritizing those who are most affected by this violence, because we can't keep invisibilizing the most oppressed of our community. Like the most oppressed, without black folks who are getting killed, that's mainly the most oppressed folks, and they don't get prioritized unless it's egregious, unless like George Floyd, everybody ends up having to see it, and then it traumatizes them. And half the time, it feels like they're more angry about them having to be traumatized than they are actually about the loss of life.
Oh, definitely.
Not to be self-righteous, I'm just being real. That's what I observe.
Sadly, yeah. It's because it's really easy to look at somebody be like abused and murdered or something, and you just are horrified. You're horrified and just compelled to act in some way, or just shocked into just freezing, and you don't know how to process it, or you don't know where to run. It's just too much. It's so much all the time. But with lumpen folks that are like somebody who's like a sovereign citizen or something, there's it's the same thing as like some of like the Black Hebrew Israelites. Where do they come from? Like, people are like consistently institutionally denied. Wait, no, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to compare all of it together. I'm saying that when you're consistently denied culture, and there is a literal conspiracy to deny anyone with your phenotype any access to any liberty forever, in this process of chattel slavery, I'm not surprised that people come out of it being like, no, there's a conspiracy, and there's going to be a whole lot of conspiracies. And so it's easy to discount those people. Like, the liberal media loves those types of police murders because they don't need to give a shit about them. Because you look at it and you're like, oh, that person has a kind of crazy idea or whatever. But they got fucking murdered. Let's be real. Let's look at the fucking power differential here. Is some powerless person who posts kind of kooky stuff online as much of a threat as the people who murdered them with impunity? And
we gotta start asking ourselves, why do we allow ourselves to reinforce those hegemonies within our own selves and with our own collectives, or we don't care about the most marginalized people? And one thing I always emphasize is even whoever wins the conflict tends to be the person with more power, not who has a better stance.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, as well as who tends to matter, is based on the same thing. Who has the most power? If you have more power in the system, then you tend to be seen as someone who matters. And that's what it is. But if you have no power, then you're just disposable. And that's what we see with a lot of Black folks that are being killed. A lot of them are with no power. A lot of them, people don't ever hear their names. You probably never heard Sean Percy before outside of Seattle.
Yeah.
For example. Shit, even when John T. A lot of people never heard John T. It all blows my mind. Even going around, they never heard John T. But I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But
it
shouldn't. It shouldn't make sense. And it shouldn't make. We should know the people who are the most vulnerable. John T. was the person who was precarious housing and was a carver you meet down at Dana Park any given day.
Right down there by within sight of the waterfront and stuff. You'd be carving stuff for people, and
and people have a lot of love for him, but that doesn't really matter, especially in the zeitgeist of our society, because he didn't have a lot of power or a lot of status,
And the people that go to that park, generally hanging out there, also don't have a lot of power,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we just touched on a little bit. I wanted to go deeper into all of this, but just because of the time constraint, we're going to go a little fast through this one.
We can
next week, with next week's topics, we'll take more time diving deeper. But I want to move to the next segment, the one that everybody's waiting for. So if you stuck around, at least waiting for the, you know what I mean? See us talking about it. The one I know Jelly is the one I'm talking about, but you know, this is what we're talking about, which is vuash versus TYT. We gotta talk about it. We gotta talk about it. You know,
Let them fight.
Yeah.
Let them fight.
Everybody share this. Let everybody know who's watching right now that we're about to talk about it. So come on back. Come on back over. But here's the thing. Like I just put it on there, right? It to me is like the pot on the kettle black. Because we got vuash on one end. Voosh. I'm glad you were taking that up. People have taken the voosh and all up. I appreciate it. But voosh over here has been known to be a chaser. I've disrespected trans women, trying to portray them as predators when it's convenient, but also speaking in a very essential light. Not to mention, he has had multiple takes, according to, as well as with comrades of mine, people that y'all might watch on here as well, that were literally pro-fascist takes that were literally out of Nazi talking about. So we got these right-wing transphobe that only sees trans people as sex objects for himself, and we get to defend against homophobia, defend against transphobia, but in a very transphobic, homophobic way. I know that sounds crazy, but you know, it's just like liberal racism. It's just like it's very similar to liberal racism of like I don't see race here.
And he admitted to being an informant. He admitted to being an informant while he was connected to like I think it was Santa Monica Antifa or something. But he fucking admitted that shit on stream, dude. That shit's on YouTube. Look it up. That
so not to mention that like, even if he is an undercover fascist, which I really think he is.
I wouldn't doubt it with his the rhetoric he uses.
Yeah, he uses all the Nazi talking points. Every Nazi talking point he uses. It is wild. But even if he wasn't undercover plant by the Nazis, he is definitely a liberal, and liberals are right wing, right? And then we got another right wing group called the Young Turks. And when I say right wing, I mean it, man. Not only the Jag former Republican, which we all know this, which I'm not going to judge you for being former Republican. I'm actually built for Republicans. They're not all evil people, but let's be real.
Rich Republicans, no. Poor Republicans, you can get away with that shit. Rich Republicans, nah. You knew exactly what you were fucking doing. You were in that shit.
I mean, he was in Fox News at one point. Like, let's be real about it. And then we got, and he's like the moderate liberal Alex Jones, right? And now, mind you, liberals, moderates, and conservatives are all right wing. I'm just going to emphasize that they're all right wing. But then you got on the other ends, you got Anna, the turf, like. You know what I mean? Who has made it a point to be all up against trans women, but then trying to say they're an ally while coming for them, while having multiple trans folks leave their platform because of it. And it's, to be real, didn't start there. They have had so many right wing takes; it's ridiculous. I remember, they got put on blast by specific people that's I've spoken some of their shit, you know what I mean? Olay, you know what I mean? About how they were using it a whole bunch of times, strategically, just like Watch, just like Destiny, just like all them racist white people. But they have a history of like bigotry, have a history of anti-blackness, white supremacy, supporting the system, supporting police. So when people come out like they're surprised, I'm like, why are we surprised by the people?
Yeah.
And in fact, like, they've been all about the culture wars, so them flipping on it doesn't really surprise me either. Because anybody who's all about the culture wars isn't really like somebody I trust, period.
Exactly.
And it's not really surprising when they turned out to be that way, especially with having so many bad takes, having so many police takes, and has been on like anti-police, like
anti-houseless. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous, dude. They're like just NIMBY ass libs. They're just, they're like, yay, police, they protect our mansions in LA. Yeah, fuck off. Don't give a shit.
And then when someone pulls their card even slightly, they get up a stick on their ass and attack like all trans people.
Yeah.
All like, trans, that kind of shit. No. And so when I see these two fighting, it's kind of humorous in some ways because, like I put in the thumbnail, it's a pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous because, Yeah, they're both of these groups, not groups, because voosh is just like a streamer where the TYT has been
Voosh is
progressing.
a cultic figure. It was the Vooshites.
It's just like he when your proposals are anarchy and anarchism means anarcho-Bidenism and just vote or you're like a bad person or whatever, like you got to get out of here with that shit. Like, I'm not somebody who's like voting purity or purity politics ever. If a person votes for like some petition or some shit, like I voted to make assisted suicide legal back in the day. Hell yeah, that shit was dope. There's a lot of presidents I'm like, nah, both those dudes are shitheads. If it looks like one might get a little bit more too much power in a given time and it won't just be deadlocked and bullshit, I might vote. Depends. But I'm not going to base what I value people as based on that. That's only one fucking day of the year. What are you doing the rest of the fucking 364? What are you doing? You know? And it doesn't mean just like talking to people online. It means like, what are you doing? Do you know any fucking neighbors that have any problems? Do you know folks? Do you know part of your neighborhood or your fucking city that has some shit going on? And you know, maybe shaking a hand and making a friend and finding out where people are at there might be able to help you link up some resources with those folks. You know, like there's all sorts of things that people can do. You know, like in the town I live in, there's like people who bike around with like first aid supplies, warming supplies, and clean sharps and a sharps container for folks on the streets. You know, there's all sorts of different things that people can do if you just look at what's going on in your neighborhood or whatever. But what voosh and the fucking TYT are always trying to do, they're trying to distract people. They're trying to recuperate people back into liberalism, where it can be easily controlled in this electoral farce, and people aren't actually thinking about the on-the-ground, long-term, multi-generational organizing that it takes for social transformation. It's not a quick game. It's not. Most of us aren't going to see a better world in our lifetimes. It'll be different, and some of those will be good to us, and some of them will be very bad to us, depending on what we build, what we create, how we block the enemy in the coming years and decades. But voosh is just going to be an informant piece of shit. Like, I pal around and debate Nazis because we love to reinforce each other. And TYT is like...
That's the point I have with voosh, but why he's undercover too, is he said multiple Nazi talking points, and remind you, he blew up debating Nazis. So I'm like, that's not wildly the plan. But also, it's like they're both just as harmful, like you said. Like, it's all recuperating it into the system. I mean, a lot of, like, if I'm real, I have a broader critique of the left, even including cornbread too, including beer too, all that. A lot of beer too, a little less, but reincorporating into the system. And I fuck with some people that do some real solid shit, but still, I have critiques around that, because the thing is, what happens is people confuse radical organizing, confuse what it is to be a revolutionary or radical with liberalism, and the system allows them to be recuperated into the system to empower it, right? It allows
make it stronger.
It allows it to also make sure that there are what we call pressure release valves. People like the Young Turks, a pressure release valve. People like voosh, a pressure relief valves. And shit, some of the people who I'm not naming because they're the homies are pressure relief valves. Now, I try to get them to not be that, because that pressure is what we need to be able to make the changes we need to make. And if we don't have that pressure, then all that's going to happen is the system's going to win. The pressure is going to continue to do what they do, and they're going to make it reshape it and rewrite history to make it look like there was some change that came about. But when I talk to my elders, when I talk to people like Mark Cook, who was out there and was a guerrilla fighter in the fucking 60s, did mad prison time behind it. He will straight tell you it is worse for us right now than it was for them in the 60s when they were doing what they were doing.
And that's from the George Jackson Brigade, like straight, like fucking, like I grew up with the stories of the George Jackson Brigade, you know, like I had one of my uncles and my mom were living on the hill when they fucking bombed the Safeway and shit. So I grew up hearing about them, like, Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, but people like TYT, people like Woosh, they are the same thing of trying to make the hegemony of capitalism, the hegemony of patriarchy, white supremacy, maintain normalization, maintain power.
Mm-hmm.
And they might say they're trying to fight it, but they're not really, because they're trying to make people assimilate to it, and they're trying to make it be more digestible. But more digestible white supremacy is still white supremacy. More digestible colonialism is still colonialism. More digestible fascism is still fascism. And so I think that's really why they're a big danger. And be honest, a lot of people on left tube are. And so especially the Bay Bros. Especially the Bay Bros.
Well, that's total lib shit. Like, the only time I've ever seen a chance of a debate being successful was during Occupy, and it was hosted at a fucking social center, and it was a bunch of the different anti-capitalist factions, and people were debating different points. I'd already left town for a trip down the coast, going to different encampments, meeting up with folks, seeing what they were doing in the various locales. But the thing is, something like that can work. You're trying to work together as different groups, even though you kind of have some different opinions on things. So a debate can be really good to define the terms between you. So you know, okay, we'll be able to work on this project, but we can't work on this project together. And that's totally fine. That's totally fucking fine. And in the process, after the debate, you're probably going to be outside smoking or, cracking a beer with somebody or drinking a kombucha or whatever. And you're going to start talking to somebody that was in one of those other tendencies. And you're going to be interested in picking their brain. Or they're going to be interested in picking yours. Because, like, they're going to be like, I haven't heard that much about that. And you might make a new friend. And somebody, maybe you're not going to work on every project with them. But you'll at least know which projects you can work on them with, So a debate that's just showing, who absolutely destroyed the other, it's just bullshit. It's just masturbation. That's all.
Now, it's for the time, we got like 15 minutes left, so I want to move on to the last segment, and it's going to be a lot to cover in 15 minutes. So we are not going to do justice, but we do want to bring it up and have it in front of y'all's mind. So please stay for the last segment. If you were here for the vuash stuff, you can always rewind it, watch it again. We talked about our opinions on it, pot, kettle, black, all that shit. But I think it's time to spend the last one talk about like Israel and the advancing of a genocide that is happening, right? Because there's things like automated weapons, like weapon deterrents being put up. And you already know how indiscriminately they've already been killing Palestinians and Palestinian children from Israel. And when I talk about Israel versus Palestine, I don't mean it's an equal conflict. No, it is one colonizing force committing a genocide against the indigenous people who are living there.
Let's just be real. The initial foundation of Israel started with in the 19-teens with the Balfour Declaration, which was a super shitty fucking anti-Semitic fucking piece of shit lord from England going, hey, how can we get rid of the Jews? Well, let's fucking make this declaration and we'll let them colonize that spot and they'll go away, but they'll also be our foothold in the Middle East. And now that role is pretty much shifted to the US, maintaining that, well, if we keep arming them with $2 billion a year for their apartheid state every year, they'll be our foothold in the Middle East. Their military bases will always be open and available. But I think that we're entering a fundamentally different phase of the conflict because not only are we the closest to a third intifada, because the death toll of Palestinians this year is like astronomical. Israel is conducting regular daytime, nighttime rate, unlike what they've ever done, and just killing lots of people. Part of it is because the Israeli state realizes what's happening in the Palestinian resistance. It used to be dominated by different political groups. You have Hamas, which is, an Islamist group, but you also have the Palestinian Liberation Front, or I'm sorry. There are like communist factions. There are different factions. Fatah is like a much more moderate. They're just trying to create some kind of compromise deal. Like there's these different factions. Then there are a bunch of armed groups. What's happening before? All those armed groups just stayed to themselves. They never helped each other raid. They never did anything like that. There's been a fundamental change in Palestinian resistance within the last year and a half, 2 years. And that is all of these different partisans from different organizations are starting to stay in their localities. They're starting to stay in their neighborhood and create self-defense units with other partisans of different varieties. This is a qualitative shift in the resistance, and it's taking place because of the ever-increasing barrage of Israeli attacks on the occupied territories, both the West Bank and Gaza Strip. It's because Israel right now is really trying to push hard at their goal of colonizing greater Israel. And that means entirely taking the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and committing, finalizing the ethnic cleansing that was really started in the Nakba in 1948, or the catastrophe. But the thing that pushes us so close to this situation is because Benjamin Netanyahu, to evade charges of corruption, all these things that would bar him from power, potentially put him up liable for crimes, he's aligned, the Likud party is aligned with parties like Jewish Power, which is an ultra-Orthodox Jewish supremacist fascist organization, also a couple of the other far-right religious parties. And together they are effectively pushing the liberal Zionists out of the realm of first-class citizenship, or at least that's what the battle is effectively on. And there's a split for the first time in Israel's history, really, that we see a split of this magnitude between the far right and religious forces and the more liberal, secular side. And again, I'm not here to debate like, oh, is the green zone okay? Whatever. Like, that's for the people there, like all of them, to decide together through their collective actions. But I do know that, even though both of them are founded on colonialism, one has this kind of, it's this poisonous promise that if we just keep this project going long enough, it will be stable. And the far right is saying, no, that's not going to happen. The only way it can be fully stable is if we fully commit to the ethnic cleansing campaign started in 1948. And so we are closer to a spark of violence that we haven't seen since the early 2000s. And all I can say is, like, to any fucking comrades or people on the ground, because again, in like the Gaza Strip and the occupied territories, the average age is just fucking babies. They're children, like, because people are killed so routinely. There's complete blockades of health care, all these different things, sanitation, that people die. And so, the Palestinian population is pushed to the brink. And in this situation, I do believe that resistance is going to try and take strategic advantage of this current split in the Zionist forces of Israel. But fuck, it's just tragic. It's sad. Yeah.
Man.
Real
quick.
Yeah.
I want to drop something else.
Oh, definitely.
So also I wanted to emphasize this real quick. One of the things I think is really important for people who are new to these movements to understand, and haven't been watching this for years, because like I've been watching and interacting with people who organize on this side of the water for Palestine for years, right? And it's literally every couple years, Israel will have a bombing campaign.
Yep.
And it'll kill thousands and thousands of people, usually thousands of children as well. Like,
when the most of the population is children, who are you bombing? Children.
And I do want to put out like the percent about the tension between the Jews who grew up in Ashkenazi Jews who came from Europe and those who lived in the Middle East all the time. The tensions there, and like the racial tensions, and how also the state of Israel tends to be like spreading the white supremacy. That's why you see like Ashkenazi Jews having so much representation specifically there. I'm saying this as someone who is an outsider, but I have a complicated relationship with it because my foster dad is an Orthodox Jew who was converting me at one point. So I'm not getting into my own personal relationship, but I think it's really important that when you see these dynamics, and also think about how the state of Israel was started with like car bombings and stuff like that. Like I know a grandchild of one of the founders, and there was nothing good came from that. They're actually in BDS. They're problematic as hell, but they recognize their family's history
Yep.
they're super rich, was super problematic because of all their wealth from stealing from Palestinians. Let's see how much time we got left. Okay, we're at our last five, so we're gonna say our last thoughts and wrap it up. So I'm gonna pass it back to you real quick, and yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Just I think the important thing that any of these conversations we're having, because we've been talking about some stuff, like kind of reminiscing nostalgia, but also like analyzing and critiquing, and I think the important thing is to see what material places in the world, in your world around you, are the places where things flow, or things are, where things are like, the thing is, logistics takes people. It takes trucks, it takes trains, it takes all these things, they don't just run on their own, and again, like, people can find creative ways to put pressure in these various places to like build our strength while depleting our enemy's strength. And I think that's the most important thing we got to look at, like in 2010 about, because it wasn't just John T. Williams. It was like Oscar Grant in the Bay Area. That shit fucking exploded because they had fucking Oscar Grant on his belly, handcuffed, and the fucking pig shot him in the back. Like, just straight up murder. Just straight up fucking cowardly fucking murder. Like, and these things left their impacts. It wasn't just the fact that, in the psychic ether, like, people remember because they saw a video. No, it was because people were in the streets. People started organizing campaigns or projects in their local community or their fucking area to try and push back on those things. Yeah. We don't remember it just because of this liberal, like, it's all the video, it's all this and that, which can be good. We need outreach. That is amazing. But we have to see each of these things as their piece. Outreach is outreach. Then there's also acting in the material world. We all are wanting to act in the material world to have real effects. And the only way we can reach out to each other and connect is through outreach,
Look, and like, let's also say this too. We have to show solidarity and interlock with each other up and down. Like, there's always been like a pipeline up and down the West Coast, all the way from here to the Bay. Also, I like to mainly here to the Bay, right? Here in Portland, the Bay, like the big, like, 3 people go up and down there, right? But like, I'll be real, y'all wouldn't know who I was if people didn't resist Oscar Grant.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm sure many of y'all have really got introduced to me, actually probably from FD at this point, but originally before that, from those who've been around a little longer, through EJ at Non-Compete. That only happened because I met this cat named Hannibal, and organized with Hannibal, and I actually think you met Hannibal too. But this cat named Hannibal, and I organized you from the Bay because he got connected to people after Oscar Grant stuff from the organization they did, and then we actually came together and had a conversation at the Anarchist Book Fair, and that's how we really met. And Hannibal is known for was in the what's it called? Was it Black? I forget what the book was called, but it was like a collection of writings from Black liberation folks across history. Hannibal's one of the people in there, and EJ was talking about it, and that's how we actually got connected. So, but like, the thing is, like, those networks, you never know the outcome of it. You never know how much bigger things can be because of that. Because I've been able to network people. We've been able to utilize it to help stop executions, even the YouTube. Yes, even this YouTube that helps stop execution, for example. Those things would never happen if it wasn't for like every piece happening. And so you don't know the way. And one of the things I want to emphasize before we leave, and we'll leave out with this, always think about, instead of the moment of what the impacts you're making right then, but the waves that impact your actions.
Yes.
The waves and the ripples are going to be what define what happens in the future. I mean, it could be as little as throwing a dish at voosh, calling them voosh, and everybody picks it up. But it can be as big as, like, it building more and more capacity till you are able to stop prisons, you're able to stop executions, you're able to use
or other mega projects
and build these different networks so much bigger to be able to make a difference. And I think about those waves, those ripples, more so than you think about that individual action or what glory it brings to you. Actually, don't even think about the glory it brings to you. Glory comes to you because of the actions, because people see it, good. But don't even be doing it for other reasons. Be doing it for reasons of what are the differences you want to see happen, or what ways may happen that you might not even foresee coming. You know what I mean? So I think we're gonna leave it with that. Just 'cause I got another meeting I have to hop on. Thanks for rocking with us. You want to give a shout out to the podcast you about to open up?
Oh,
yourself?
I don't know what that is yet.
You
But
don't know
we'll figure that out.
Okay.
We'll figure that out.
This is my call, so expect to see more jelly up here chilling. You know what I mean? And we're gonna be doing this like every Monday. At least for the next month, we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
It seems like a pretty decent stream. So I hope that y'all enjoyed it. And we're about to be out of here. Deuces.
Peace.
Oh yeah, subscribe to our media, support my Patreon, Big Villainous. And you can always throw some stuff, some love financially through the like super chat or stuff you want to, or whatever. But we out, y'all.
Peace.
I figured there's always a countdown, y'all. So y'all see my face for a second.